Rivals highlights Washington and Beijing's starkly different approaches to a crisis in the region. The Biden administration yesterday called the military seizure of power in Myanmar and detainment of civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi a coup d'etat as pro-democracy groups protested across Asia. The State Department officially called that military takeover a coup d'etat, and the designation required the Biden administration to cut foreign aid to the country. The U.S. government said it has not been able to contact leading members of Myanmar's civilian government, including de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi, and is working with Japan and India to put pressure on the country's military for deposing the leaders in the coup. Myanmar police have filed charges against ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi for allegedly illegally importing walkie-talkie radios as the civil disobedience movement gathers pace across the Southeast Asian nation in protest at the military coup against the democratically elected government. The sound of pots and pans rang out in protest in Myanmar's biggest city last night. And clangs and honking car horns marked the first widespread protest against the military coup this week. We do have Aung San Suu Kyi facing up to 3 years in prison if convicted, and is going to remain in police custody until the 15th of February, allegedly being held in her home, according to BBC. A Moscow court has sent Alexei Navalny to prison for 2.5 years in a heated hearing in which the Kremlin critic ridiculed claims he broke his parole conditions while in a coma and denounced Russia's leader as Putin the poisoner. The court's decision yesterday to turn that 2014 suspended sentence into real jail time will see the 44-year-old anti-corruption campaigner who accuses Moscow of poisoning him last year serve a lengthy prison term. More than 1,400 protesters were detained by Russian authorities in rallies supporting Alexei Navalny after the Kremlin's most prominent critic was jailed for nearly 3 years amid international condemnation. The jailing of Alexei Navalny may yet prove a turning point in Vladimir Putin's presidency, not just because of the mere fact of his imprisonment, but because of the power of his words in the courtroom yesterday. 2 FBI agents were killed and 3 others were injured in a shootout with the suspect in Sunrise, Florida yesterday. President Biden weighed in on these 2 FBI agents who were killed and 3 others who were wounded while trying to serve a search warrant at a Florida home, an encounter that turned into one of the federal law enforcement agency's bloodiest in decades. President Biden also arrived at the Capitol last night to pay his respects to the fallen officer at 10 o'clock last night, along with First Lady Jill Biden, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy were present for this ceremonial arrival of Sicknick's ashes last night. The remains of Brian Sicknick, the Capitol Police officer who died after being injured during the January 6th Capitol attack, arrived last night to lie in honor in the building's rotunda. And an urn with the remains of this U.S. Capitol Police officer who suffered fatal injuries when this riotous mob rampaged through the building was borne up the steps of the Capitol's East Forum in the frigid wind last night and sat atop a bier in the rotunda to lie in honor. The House impeachment managers charged that former President Trump is singularly responsible for inciting the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol last month. U.S. Representative Jackie Speier has sent a letter to President Biden urging him to issue an executive order identifying white supremacy and violent extremism as a threat to national security. The Senate voted yesterday to confirm Alejandro Mayorkas as Homeland Security Secretary, the first Latino and immigrant to serve at the helm of that department. And Amazon said yesterday that Jeff Bezos, the company's founder and CEO, would be stepping down from his role in the third quarter of this year. He'll be transitioning to executive chair of the company, and Andy Jassy, who currently leads Amazon Web Services, is set to take over as CEO of the company. We'll talk more in detail about that later in the program. President Biden will order a major review of asylum processing at the U.S.-Mexico border and the legal immigration system as he seeks to undo some of former President Trump's hardline policies. A dozen state police officers have been arrested for allegedly killing 19 people, including Guatemalan migrants whose bodies were found shot and burned near the U.S. border. And the Biden administration said it would start sending some coronavirus vaccine doses directly to pharmacies. For months, public health officials have said that younger adults have been big drivers of the spread of COVID-19 in the United States, but new research suggests there's another age group that may be fueling new cases of the virus, people aged 35 to 49. Canada, under pressure over the slow pace of inoculation against COVID-19, has signed its first deal to allow a foreign vaccine to be manufactured domestically, according to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in Ottawa. And after criticism last year for an early rollout, Russia's Sputnik vaccine, 91.6% effective against symptomatic COVID-19. The UAE reporting nearly 4,000 new coronavirus cases, and Palestine has begun its coronavirus vaccination campaign, starting with medical workers. The U.S. State Department reacted coolly to an Iranian suggestion that Washington and Tehran take synchronized steps to return to the Iran nuclear deal, though a U.S. official said the stance should not be seen as a rejection. Iran has deepened a key breach of its 2015 nuclear deal, enriching uranium with a large number of advanced centrifuge machines in an underground plant as it faces off with the new U.S. administration on salvaging the accord. Nearly a third of all detainees held in Afghan detention centers say they've suffered some form of torture or ill treatment, according to a new UN report. The Taliban have been on a diplomatic blitz since peace talks with the Afghan government have stalled in Qatar last month, and the Biden administration said it plans to review a U.S.-Taliban agreement that was signed last February. Opposition parties in Ethiopia's Tigray region have warned of a huge humanitarian disaster if aid is not delivered urgently. And a UN rights monitor has said today that more than 900 people had disappeared or been killed in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo in the second half of last year as a notorious militia stepped up attacks in the region. European Union Chief Ursula von der Leyen faces the deepest political crisis of her mandate so far under intense fire over delayed vaccine deliveries and the bungled rollout of export controls. Angela Merkel has promised all Germans a coronavirus vaccine by the end of September, following growing anger that delegated responsibility to Brussels has slowed down national inoculation programs. And meanwhile, France will only administer the AstraZeneca coronavirus vaccine to people under the age of 65, according to President Emmanuel Macron in Paris today. The Netherlands is to introduce rapid COVID-19 breath tests to sites across the country to speed up testing processes and make it less intrusive. Testing facilities in Amsterdam were this week the first to start using the Spironose, a machine which requires a person to breathe into it to indicate a possible coronavirus infection within a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the World News on Radio Caravan, and more than 70 homes have been lost in a wildfire outside Australia's western city of Perth that is expected to continue burning for days. A team of investigators working on behalf of the World Health Organization visited a major virus research laboratory in China's central city of Wuhan, as China reported the fewest number of COVID-19 cases for a single day in more than a month, the latest indication that the current wave of the disease is subsiding ahead of the Lunar New Year holiday break. The Winter Olympics, due to begin in 1 year, offer China a chance to show off its epidemic controls. Acknowledging that the U.S. is in serious competition with China, the Biden administration has asserted that it will counter Beijing's aggressive and coercive actions, sustain its key military advantages, and restore America's vital security partnerships. Sri Lanka, meanwhile, has said it had pulled out of an agreement with Japan and India to develop a deep-sea container terminal viewed as an effort to counter China's growing influence in the region. India slammed international celebrities for making comments in support of protesting farmers as inaccurate and irresponsible, and said vested interest groups were trying to build opinion against the country. U.S. singer Rihanna, climate change activist Greta Thunberg, and U.S. lawyer and activist Meena Harris, the niece of Vice President Kamala Harris, made comments on social media drawing attention to the plight of farmers. And a Punjab-born former Premier of Canada's British Columbia province, Ujjal Dev Dosanjh, has written an open letter to the Chief Justice of India to constitute a special investigation team to probe the violence that erupted at the Red Fort on Republic Day. India has hit out at a vested interest groups for imposing, as the government said, their agenda on farmers' protests. The protests against the farm laws disrupted Parliament for the second day today, and Agriculture Minister Narendra Singh Tomar said the centre is not holding any informal talks with the protesting farmers. A Mahapanchayat attended by the Bharatiya Kisan Union renewed the call to repeal the new farm laws. Congress has raised the issue of cases filed against its MP Shashi Tharoor and 6 journalists in the Rajya Sabha, and it is anxious to expand its digital footprint to take on an entrenched BJP. Congress now set to recruit an army of 5 lakh web warriors with the idea of amplifying its message across social media platforms. Andaman and Nicobar Islands have become the first state or union territory in India to be officially rid of COVID-19 as the country showed a declining trend. And we do have multiple factors that may have contributed to India reporting a higher COVID-19 related deaths per million population than other South Asian countries such as Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and Pakistan. It is a new dad Virat Kohli returning to captain a buoyant India against England, and after losing 4 wickets in the first 2 sessions, Bangladesh held firm at the end of the first day of the first test against the West Indies. We do have Pakistan's COVID-19 vaccination drive that has been launched today, and that's all.